Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've recharged all your batteries right now. The food was great, the connections were even better, that you got to have a bit of ice cream over here, some good or well-deserved dessert to get ready for the next conversation. Speaking of which, the next conversation brings together two founders who helped build one of the most important bridges between traditional finance and crypto markets. In fact, it all started in 2018 when crypto was still seen as an experiment. And these founders started in Zurich with a different path, making crypto investable through regulated financial products. So fast forward to today, you are about to hear from two founders of Switzerland's largest crypto unicorn. You heard right. Now, the company has listings across multiple European exchanges, the US, and beyond, but this conversation won't be just about crypto. It will be how does it feel to operate under uncertainty for a long period of time, how to make fast decisions when we have two very different founders, and above all, how Switzerland can really be the ideal launchpad if you find the right niche. Let's explore this with the founders of 21 Shares. Please welcome Hany Rashwan and Ophelia Snyder. Welcome, both of you. A pleasure to have you here. Now, again, you founded 21 Shares in Zurich at a time when crypto was very uncertain. So why did you bet on something that was really not clear? How did you know it was going to be the future?
I think you have to be contrarian and right. We're on a beautiful stage now, but for the first 2 years of the company, everyone in our space thought that we were absolutely stupid. On one hand, we were bringing more centralized, more regulated lens on crypto, which especially at the time was much more on the decentralized future. And on the other hand, we decided to, of all places, do it in Switzerland. And so both financial experts as well as technology and startup experts thought that what we were doing was rather stupid. Among the most stupid things that they've heard, and they advised us really strongly against it. But again, you have to be contrarian and right. We had a very specific thesis that crypto would do well, that it is here to stay, that Switzerland is actually, after we looked at 27 different jurisdictions around the world, was the place to do it. We thought that the bigger powers, like the United States, would spend way too much time, and that was true. Regulating it, getting comfortable with it. And in the meantime, we were able to set up base in Switzerland, and by the time the US was ready for us, we already had billions in AUM. So it seems in retrospect very easy and straightforward, but in reality, we were absolutely considered doing something very, very catastrophically wrong for a long, long time.
And a lot of the insight behind that actually came from our moms, which is an interesting thing.
So your moms told you, don't do it?
No, actually quite the opposite. Hany and I started talking about what later became 21 Shares because our moms were trying to buy crypto. They completely understood the macro reason it was supposed to exist, and they were looking for a product. And they asked us to try to find a way for them to invest. And it turned out there wasn't any. So we didn't really set out to build a company. We tried to solve a problem for our moms, and it turns out that they were not unique in their problem set. And I think that was one of the other really linchpin moments for us in starting the company.
Well, how lucky are they, right?
Yes.
You know, I have these genius children. Hey, can you just make something where I can invest all this money? That's great. Okay, so looking back, was there any moment where the whole thing could have easily failed?
Dozens.
Yes. Many, repeatedly over, like, default alive comes much later in the cycle than people think it does. And I think it never feels easier. You get better at being a founder. Being a founder doesn't get easier. The problems just get bigger. Pretty much at the same rate you get better at it. So you are constantly in situations, especially in volatile industries, especially in new industries and new technologies, where you have no idea if this is going to work.
You're constantly walking on a fine thread, right? Like balancing it out.
You're surfing very unpredictable waves, and it is that way for a long time. The default for startups is not alive. The default for startups is that you're fighting every day, each and every day, to stay alive. And that lasts for far longer than I think most people realize. I think in retrospect, though, Ophelia said something yesterday that really struck with me, which is, what did you say? On the macro, big decisions wouldn't change anything. And on the micro, we would have changed hundreds of things. Like there are many, many small details that we would absolutely, if we could go back and optimize, would do differently. But on the big scheme of things, not too much.
All right, so we'll get a bit, deeper into that later. But now I want to know, what can founders in Switzerland do better than anywhere else? Because you chose a very small country to launch something so big.
Do you want to take that first? Do you want me to?
Why don't you start and I'll finish?
Sure. We built the company here very much by intention, and we looked at and studied so many other places, and so I think we have a very good gauge of what this looks like, especially in comparison with others. And there are areas that I and we believe Switzerland excels at. And I think especially in an age of AI and in an age of this increased competition that we're seeing from everywhere, one should gravitate towards something that they can be the top 3 at globally, if not the top 2, because those tend to actually accrue most of the value. And so when we look at Switzerland, there are a few very key verticals. And furthermore, there are a few very key ways of doing things. Switzerland as a nation is a country of niches, right? And niches is how one wins, provided you get a small niche that's underappreciated that then grows rapidly, as we did with crypto. But I think there is a very special series of muscles in Switzerland that make certain companies far more easier to do here. Deep tech, more long-term focused perspective, niches that really matter. And if you look at even the DACH or Swiss Mittelstand, it has some of the same characteristics, just not with new industries and new tech. And so I think those are all the very positive things that one should double down on and realize Switzerland is top 3 in the world at a number of these things, which is why in robotics and AI and other verticals now Switzerland is out shining. Where I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about is all of the areas where I think America really excels or China really excels. It's our experience with Swiss startups is that the commercialization aspect often is too limited. The tech is really wonderful, but it's either sold in the wrong way or sold to the wrong people. There's an old adage about first-time founders really fixate on product. And then second-time founders realize the product is not the key. The distribution is, and whoever owns distribution has that. A lot of people here may have used Slack. It's wonderful. It's so much better in most ways than Teams. But Teams is a lot bigger because Microsoft has more distribution. And ... Microsoft also owns Slack now because they were able to purchase it. And so there are things that first-time founders don't often think about. Marketing, sales, distribution is really, really key. As third-time founders, I think we would fixate on the company itself for such, and give it more attention. I think when we first started,
100%.
At some point we had 150 people, and the work that we're doing is not directly leading to the work that the customers see. The people and the team around us, the company and the structure and the culture we've built are the ones that are moving forward. And this is something that I would spend even more time thinking about, because when you build the machine that makes things, and when your hand directly doesn't lead to that, it's a complete other consideration.
And I would just add, I think that's part of the both the strengths and I think some of the unique challenges around building in Switzerland is that, right? It's a question of how do you build culture that's going to be interested in entrepreneurship more broadly than just the founders, and how important that is, especially in early days, that type of ownership, that type of wanting to take on large chunks of work and build around that. And I think Hany's very much correct here. I think there's a lot of amazing technology being built in Switzerland, and I think on the product side, on the innovation side, on the technology side, Switzerland is in a commanding position in a few really interesting critical places and has the ability to expand to a number of different niches where there's extremely helpful and specific to Switzerland positioning. Right, this isn't just biotech and banking, right? There are a number of different places where you can build really interesting and unique things, especially given the university ecosystem. It's quite remarkable. But the trick is not to take too conservative of a view of commercialization. The trick to picking a niche is the small but rapidly expanding, and the but rapidly expanding is how you build and scale large businesses. And in a lot of cases, you both have to define and expand that niche yourself, especially if you're a category creator. And that's something we dealt with, which is how do you even begin to open a category that doesn't really have any foundation?
That's one of my questions here. So how do you know that you have found the right niche to delve into, and not just something that's gonna fail in a few months or so? And how do you manage to monopolize it like you did?
So I'm not sure it's a bad thing if the niche fails in a couple of months in. That's probably the best case scenario if you've picked the wrong thing, because startups don't die, founders kill them, right? A founder can keep an idea alive
Startups
forever.
never die from homicide.
Yes.
It's almost always suicide.
Yes,
Okay.
you actually have to stop as a founder. If you want your startup to be done, you actually have to stop. And that's a really difficult thing for most people. So arguably, I think if you pick the wrong thing and you're able to let it go in 6 months, that would be a not terrible outcome versus spending 10 years on something that's not going to work. I think when it comes to selecting a niche, it goes back to what Hany was talking about, which is you need to be in a place where you can credibly be number one or number two, ideally in the space. You need to make sure that that niche can actually expand. So if you're building really niche technology, it needs to have a pretty wide range of potential applications. And then you need to fixate on one of them, and then slowly pick off the adjacencies. I think there's a tendency to say, hey, I have this really big idea, we can apply it to 37 industries. Let's do 37 industries today. You don't want to do that. You want to pick one thing and be smart about how you're choosing to do that commercialization, but with a vision towards being able to pick off additional applications and adjacencies. And I think those are the hallmarks of having picked a good niche where each opportunity is large and there are multiple potential applications for what you're doing. I think in our case, it really was a question of, okay, is it going to be just a Bitcoin story? Is there going to be multiple assets? How is this going to integrate not just into individuals' retirement plans, but how are you going to think about every portion of financial infrastructure and how this asset class is going to be onboarded? And I think that was, for us, the adjacencies, right? You start with individuals, eventually you work your way up to pension plans and governments and other countries and other nations, and there was a platform from which to expand. And I think you're looking for opportunities that have those sets of characteristics.
Now, you both come from very different backgrounds, right? Engineering, finance, and as startups keep growing and become scale-ups and then unicorns, you have to make decisions really fast. So, you both have to be aligned with those decisions. So how can two very different people manage to do that?
I have been blessed with having a wonderful co-founder. It's not my first startup. My other co-founders weren't as wonderful. And I think it is something that, again, to go back to the earlier point about some of the things that I concentrated on more after my first or second startup, this was one of them. The team is really important, and the team really starts with the co-founding group, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. And I think as a result of a mixture of being lucky with that, as well as maybe doing 1 or 2 good things, we never had those dynamics. And what often happened is so startups win by concentration. It's exactly the opposite advice a financial advisor would tell you. Startups lose by focusing on too many things, diversifying too much. Focus and concentration with limited resources is how one wins. And so I would say throughout, we were very aligned on the overall vision, and we knew where we wanted to go. How we get there, who knows? And what often happened, which I really loved, is that more often than not, almost all the time, we would actually agree on the choice or the outcome or the direction, but have arrived at that decision for very different reasons from very different directions. And so if anything, in our case, the diverse backgrounds actually further solidified every decision that we then agreed
It complemented.
on, because
The reasons
there were
complemented
different
each other.
reasons behind it.
So there was no friction between both of you ever?
Oh, there was lots of friction.
What was the biggest friction?
I think when
and
you
how
have
did you
two
solve it?
people who think very differently, like it sounds fabulous. We're going to take two completely different paths and end up at the same place. Yes, the process of doing that is not frictionless. I think the key to managing friction in a healthy co-founder dynamic, emphasis on the word like healthy, there's a healthy amount of friction, and there should be, because you want to intellectually challenge each other, you want to push back. That needs to be part of the dynamic. If not, you're not going to be able to make any good decisions together. It's actually not dissimilar from, honestly, like getting married and raising children together, right? Like your
It's
startup
pretty much
is
the same.
your baby. It's the same thing. And you, in my experience, want to approach it similarly, with like the same degree of respect, the same degree of appreciation for the other person's perspective, the same amount of patience to keep coming back and explaining, the same amount of starting from a place of goodwill. Like you are assuming like default positive intent with the other person. Like there's a whole bunch of assumptions we all make with our significant others, with our partners, with the people we do business with. When you work together every single day, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for almost 10 years, I've spent more time with Hany than almost any other person on the planet. If you start from a place of assuming positive intent and you bring to it that kind of respect for the other person's opinion, you work through that friction. And instead of that friction being a drag on your relationship, it actually becomes really
An engine?
fun.
Okay.
Fun, right? Like it's intellectual, you're sparring, you're arguing, you're working through things. It's actually enjoyable.
I think what we were able to do that a lot of founder groups fall into is we didn't make it personal at any point. And so we actually had disagreements, we had friction points, but at no point was it personal. And so if you assume positive intent, and it requires you having someone on the other side that deserves to have that be the default assumption, which is already a high bar, but if you've done that well, then nothing is personal and you're just seeking intellectual honesty. You're just seeking what is the best way, and who chooses it for what reason does not matter. What we were actually seeking was the truth. Requires a base of support, competence, good camaraderie between the groups, respect, and all of the things that Ophelia said. But at the end of the day, that transformed it out of any personal ego, and way more about the logic, the facts, and what is the objectively right decision.
I would add maybe one thing, which is important, actually. Being very clear on what you are good at. And very clear on what the other person's good at is
To delegate, okay,
foundational.
you take care of this part, I take care of this other part.
I am much better at regulations and compliance than Hany ever will be, and I'm much better at some like financial engineering stuff than Hany ever will be. I will never be able to be as good of a communicator as Hany is. I will never be able to be as creative when it comes to commercialization as he is. These are very, very different skill sets. And the sooner you understand who is going to bring a unique perspective on something and where that's coming from and where you can lean into your co-founder's superpowers, so to speak, the easier it is to work through that. And for me, at least, that's always been a foundational part of that respect that we're talking about, right? It's respect for as a person, but also respect for their mind and the things that they're going to see that you don't, and building trust around that.
So is there any decision that you got wrong early on?
Many.
Dozens.
What was the biggest one? like I said before, the biggest one that, oh,
There are no biggest ones. There's just 100 wrong decisions
Okay.
that each created a fire, and
you had to just,
it vastly improved our firefighting abilities. And after a while, we had better muscle and more experience. I've seen that fire before. Oh, I know how that burns. But this is one of
so
those
would
things
you
where
encourage the bad decisions
I think we
to
were.
grow and to keep learning, or?
It depended on if we were still going towards the same target at the end. And our worst decisions are ones that took us off track. Some of that was lack of focus, investing in other things, not focusing on our core competencies as a company. So there were some things there that very clearly took our eye off the ball, so to speak, and made us lack focus. That was bad. But other than that, we arguably launched at the wrong time. We launched at a terrible time. We
Terrible.
slaved away getting the first 5 million as a seed. Crypto markets being what they were in
Yeah.
November of 2018, after 1 day of trading, our 5 million was now 3.5. So that's
Also,
not ideal.
Of the 5 components of that product, one of them went into a technical issue that basically meant you could not settle or transact anything. So this 5-component product we'd been working on for over a year was now a 4-component
Within
product.
a day.
Within 1
This
day.
is the first 24 hours of congratulations, you've released the
And
product.
we did, yeah, it wasn't great. We made many, many, many mistakes. And I think maybe this is like a good takeaway. You can make many, many, many mistakes.
And you will.
And you will. Like, there's no actual way to not. And that's fine. The important thing is to get a couple of key things right. The market you've chosen, the commercialization plan, the senior people you're working with. If you're going to work with a co-founder, who that person is, those are important and you can't get those wrong. There's a lot of other stuff you're going to do that's not going to be right. And as long as you're trying to kind of maintain that focus and putting the work in, anything is fixable, in my experience.
It's a
Like,
very
it's
good
very
point.
difficult to actually do something that is unfixable. And the founder job, if you were to distill it to like one task, is make a lot of hard decisions quickly with limited information, less time, less money, and fewer resources than you would like to make that decision. Under that framework, you are going to make so many wrong decisions, and that's fine.
You only need to make 3 or 5 right decisions, and you need to get there, because sometimes it took us a while. You need to learn from your mistakes. You need to adapt to them quickly. You need to understand them, carry them with you. But I think simply trying to not do any mistakes, you're probably not trying hard enough. You should fail. You should make mistakes because you're pushing.
Excellent. Now we have a few minutes left, and I'm wondering, what about the competition? You know, you're in a very small country, and here you're starting with this unpredictable niche. You don't want anybody to compete with you. You want to be the right one. So how much should you pay attention to the competition, and how much should you ignore it?
This is my favorite Hanyism from all the years in building. It doesn't matter what your competitors are doing. And the Hanyism is what your competitor is doing today is sort of like looking at light from a star. It's what happened ages ago, right? Like, that star may be gone, that idea may still work, may not. The delay between what you're seeing and what they're currently doing is so enormous that it's not a relevant signal for the most part.
There's that aspect of it, which is absolutely true. When you see press from a competitor, chances are someone made a decision a year or 2 ago that then you are seeing some results that they want to showcase for their own reasons. What does that have to do with anything? It's not actually an interesting data point. Then the second thing is, what are you going to do about it? What is in your control? There are so many things in our control that we don't focus on enough. And as a startup founder, now that I'm worried about what this other startup or this other incumbent is doing, I don't know what their factors are. I don't know what their thinking is, what their budget is, what their intentions are. And most importantly, I can't influence that in any way, shape, or form. So why would I worry about it when there are so many things that I can do with my hands every day that I actually get to see results of? I think competition should just simply be ignored. The one caveat is maybe at the very beginning of the company. Because if you're in a space where everyone you talk to about your startup's like, oh yeah, that sounds brilliant, you're too late. If it's too obvious, you're too late. If there are too many people in the space already, if you have too many competitors, if you have too many well-heeled competitors, chances are, if you're doing something similar, the timing is not right. And so on that aspect, really think about, but it goes back to the niche point and being one or second or first at something globally, or have the potential of doing that. It forces you towards smaller niches with less competition, but in any case, as you grow, don't spend any minutes wasting your time.
You're better off listening to your customers. Like if every single one of your customers is now telling you, I'm buying this product and not yours, that's useful. If it's anything other than that, like if what you're reading, what you're seeing, it's not going to change anything.
So we have 1 minute, and with that, let's close for any advice for founders trying to scale from Switzerland or Europe into bigger global markets.
Focus on the thing that differentiates you versus the Americans, the Chinese, and everyone in between. And again, fixate on what it is, however small or big it is, that you can be first or second globally at. Even the American companies need to be first or second globally at something.
Understand how to launch a business or a product in that jurisdiction. Do not make the incorrect assumption that the way things are done in Switzerland with your Swiss clients is going to translate to other markets. It's worth spending time, and it comes back to this commercialization point. It doesn't mean you need to change your product, but it's extremely likely that the way in which you actually approach distribution in that market and building a team around that market is going to be radically different. And so every time you come into a new market, you should almost treat it like it's a new startup, right? Which is, okay, who's the right people? How do I think about that? How do I build culture around this initiative? How do I distribute in that market? How do I work with clients in that market? It's going to be different, and if you try to run back exactly the same playbook, it's probably not going to work.
Excellent. Give it up for Hany and Ophelia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Can I take this?